I sat in the lawyer's mahogany office, hands trembling as Mr. Patterson adjusted his reading glasses. My brother Derek sprawled confidently in the leather chair beside me, already smirking before the words left the attorney's mouth. Our father had passed 3 weeks earlier. Heart attack in the barn, quick and merciful, they said. I'd been the one to find him, his worn work gloves still clutching a wrench. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. The will was straightforward, almost cruel in its simplicity. Derek received the farm, all 300 acres, the main house, the livestock, the equipment shed, everything that mattered, everything Dad had built over 40 years of sunrise labor and sunset prayers. And me? I received the old Ferguson tractor that had been rusting behind the equipment shed since I was 12. The one with the seized engine and flat tires. The one Dad always said he'd fix someday. Derek didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. He'd always been Dad's golden boy, the son who stayed, who worked the fields, who understood the language of soil and seasons. I was the disappointment, the one who'd left for college, who chose books over baling hay. Mr. Patterson slid papers across his desk for our signatures. Derek signed with flourish. I signed numbly, my vision blurring. Outside, the autumn sun felt too bright, too indifferent to my breaking heart. Derek clapped my shoulder with false sympathy before climbing into his new truck, technically Dad's old truck, now his by inheritance. I stood alone in the parking lot, wondering why Dad's final message to me was a broken machine I'd never wanted, from a life I'd tried so hard to escape. 3 days later, I returned to the farm at dawn. Derek was already in the fields with the hired hands, surveying his kingdom. I parked my sedan near the equipment shed, out of sight. The Ferguson tractor sat exactly where it had for 15 years, a monument to neglect. Rust bloomed across its green paint like autumn leaves. Weeds had claimed the space beneath its chassis. Birds had nested in the engine compartment. I approached it slowly, memories flooding back. This was the tractor Dad taught me to drive when I was 7, my small hands barely reaching the steering wheel while his calloused ones guided mine. We'd spent entire summers together on this machine, plowing fields, his laughter mixing with the engine's rumble. Then came the accident when I was 12. Nothing serious. I'd driven over a rock pile and bent the axle. But Dad's face had darkened with disappointment, and somehow everything changed after that. He stopped inviting me to help, started spending more time teaching Derek instead. I'd assumed he blamed me for damaging his equipment. Now, staring at this deliberate inheritance, I wondered if there'd been something more. The shed key still hung where it always had, on a rusty nail behind a loose board. I unlocked the rolling door, and dim light spilled across forgotten tools and oil-stained concrete. The air smelled of gasoline and decades of honest work. I found Dad's old toolbox and began clearing debris from the tractor. This was mine now, broken as it was. Maybe fixing it would help me understand why he'd left it to me. Or maybe I just needed something to do with my grief besides crying. The morning stretched into afternoon as I worked. Removing the bird nests revealed more rust than I'd expected. The engine was completely seized, just as I remembered. This restoration would take weeks, maybe months. I was wiping down the seat when my hand caught on something unusual. The cushion moved slightly, not quite flush with its frame. I pressed harder and it shifted, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. My heart hammered as I lifted the seat completely. Inside the hollow space lay a metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox, covered in the same rust and dust as everything else. It was locked with an old combination padlock. I lifted it carefully, surprised by its weight. Something substantial was inside. I shook it gently, hearing papers shift and something metallic clink. Why would Dad hide something in a broken tractor he knew would sit unused for years? Unless he'd planned this. Unless he'd wanted me specifically to find it. My fingers traced the combination dial. 3 numbers, endless possibilities. I tried his birthday, nothing. My mother's birthday, nothing. The year they'd bought the farm, still nothing. Then I remembered the summer I was 9. Dad had taken me to the county fair, just the two of us. I'd won a blue ribbon for my 4-H project, my first real achievement on the farm. He'd been so proud, had bought us matching sodas and let me stay up late watching the fireworks. The date, 07-15-84. The lock clicked open on the first try. My hands shook as I removed it, lifting the lid slowly. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, yellowed with age, all addressed to me in Dad's familiar handwriting. Beneath them, something else glinted, a heavy brass key, and underneath, a folded piece of paper. I carried the box into the shed's dusty corner, sitting on an overturned crate beneath the single hanging bulb. The envelopes were organized by date, spanning 15 years, starting just after my 12th birthday, after the tractor incident. The first letter was dated a week after I'd damaged the Ferguson. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. "Dear Jesse," it began in Dad's careful script. "Today you turned away from me in the barn, and I saw fear in your eyes. Not fear of the tractor, but fear of disappointing me again. I need you to know. You could never disappoint me. I was angry at myself for letting you operate equipment you weren't ready for, not angry at you." I stopped reading, tears blurring the words. All those years I'd been certain he blamed me. The second letter was from my high school graduation. "Watched you accept your scholarship today. Your mother cried with joy." I couldn't stop thinking about how the farm will never be enough for your bright mind. Derek loves this land the way I do, with his whole heart. But you, Jesse, you were meant for something different, something more. Letter after letter revealed a father I'd never known. He wrote about watching me struggle to fit into farm life, seeing my loneliness, understanding my need to escape. He wrote about the impossible choice he faced. Dividing the farm would destroy it, but giving it all to Derek seemed to erase me from the family legacy. The letters stopped being sent because he'd been too afraid I'd see them as goodbye, as permission to never come back. So he'd hidden them, along with his plan. The last letter was dated 2 months before his death. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope you can forgive an old man's cowardice. I couldn't tell you in person, but everything you need is here. The brass key gleamed against my palm, heavy with purpose. It was old-fashioned, ornate, with a circular bow decorated with scrollwork. Definitely not a modern key. This belonged to something antique, something significant. I unfolded the paper beneath it, revealing a hand-drawn map. Dad's shaky lines depicted the farm, but certain areas were marked with X's and cryptic notes I couldn't immediately decipher. One location, the old equipment shed's foundation, had a circled notation. Original homestead, 1887 safe, northwest corner, 3 feet down. My chest tightened. The farm had been in our family for generations, passed down from my great-great-grandfather who'd homesteaded it after the Civil War. I'd heard stories but never paid much attention, too busy trying to escape to care about history. Dad's note at the bottom read, "What makes a legacy isn't land, it's choice. Derek chose the farm. You chose your own path. Both were right. Your inheritance isn't in acres, it's in understanding why I let you go and why I need you to come back now to finish what I started." I studied the map more carefully. Besides the safe location, he'd marked the north 40 acres, land we'd always kept wild, never plowing or building on it. His notation read, "Research Conservation Easement Files, County Records 1985. Another mark indicated the old creek bed on the eastern property line, noting water rights dispute, see legal documents in safe. The final marking circled the broken tractor itself. Your inheritance. Fix what's broken, find what's hidden, understand what matters. I looked up at the Ferguson, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just a broken tractor or a cruel reminder of childhood inadequacy. It was a puzzle box, a time capsule, a message from beyond the grave. I found a shovel in the shed's back corner and headed to the old foundation. The equipment shed had been built over the original homestead's remains. Dad had mentioned it once, years ago. The first house, a modest structure, had burned in 1923, and my great-grandfather had built elsewhere on the property. The northwest corner was now just hard-packed earth and scattered stones. I began digging as the afternoon sun slanted through the open shed door. 3 feet down seemed impossibly deep, but Dad's instructions had always been precise. 1 foot, 2 feet. My shoulders ached, sweat soaking through my shirt, despite the autumn chill. This was the kind of physical work I'd left behind, the labor I'd traded for conference rooms and computer screens. At 2.5 feet, my shovel struck something solid with a metallic ring. I dropped to my knees, clearing dirt with my hands like an archaeologist. A corner of dark metal emerged, then an edge, then finally the top of an old safe, built directly into the foundation itself. It was smaller than modern safes, perhaps 2 feet wide and 18 inches deep, its face decorated with faded gilt scrollwork. The manufacturer's name was barely legible, Sherman & Company, Philadelphia, Esther, 1869. And there in the center was a keyhole that matched my brass key perfectly. I wiped my filthy hands on my jeans and inserted the key with shaking fingers. It turned smoothly, despite over a century of burial, the mechanism still sound. The door swung open with a grinding protest of ancient hinges. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay bundles of documents, photographs, and a leather journal. I carried everything back to the shed's light, laying the contents carefully on Dad's old workbench. The leather journal was cracked with age, but surprisingly intact. The first entry was dated March 1887, written in beautiful cursive by my great-great-grandfather, Samuel Morrison. "Claimed my quarter section today," he'd written. "The land office clerk said I was crazy, too rocky, too hilly, too far from town. But I saw something he didn't. The creek runs year-round, the soil in the valley is black and deep, and the high ground will protect from spring floods. This land chose me as much as I chose it." I flipped through years of entries, watching my ancestors' life unfold. Struggles with drought, celebrations of good harvests, the birth of children, the death of his wife, the slow building of prosperity from nothing. Then I found the entry Dad had wanted me to see. June 1889. James Thornton approached me today with an offer to buy my creek access. Offered twice what the land is worth. I refused, and he turned ugly, said his cattle operation needs that water, that I'm being selfish keeping it for my small operation. Told me I'd regret not selling. The entries continued, documenting an escalating dispute. Thornton tried legal challenges, claiming prior water rights. He brought in lawyers, attempted to reroute the creek, even threatened violence. Samuel stood firm, documenting everything meticulously. The final entry about Thornton was dated October 1890. "Judge ruled in my favor today. Water rights confirmed as mine by homestead claim. Thornton's operation failed last month. Turns out he'd been cheating his investors. His land sold at auction to settle debts. Justice, though I take no pleasure in another man's ruin." But there was a note in Dad's handwriting tucked into that page. Thornton's great-grandson is James Thornton III. Guess who bought the property next to ours in 1985? The documents in the safe told a story Dad had never shared. In 1985, James Thornton III had purchased the adjacent property and immediately filed a claim disputing our water rights to the creek, citing his great-grandfather's alleged prior claim from the 1880s. Dad had hired a lawyer, spent thousands fighting it. The legal documents showed a 3-year battle, correspondence growing increasingly hostile. Thornton wanted our farm, all of it, and the water rights dispute was his opening move. Then I found Dad's handwritten notes from 1988. Thornton offered to drop the lawsuit if I sell him the North 40 acres, the land with the creek headwaters. He knows if he controls that, he controls our water supply. Can't sell, won't sell. But legal fees are bleeding us dry. A newspaper clipping from 1989 showed the resolution. Dad had worked with the county land trust to place a conservation easement on the north 40 acres, permanently protecting it from development while securing our water rights. The easement payment had covered his legal fees and ensured Thornton could never claim the land. But there was a catch, detailed in a letter from the county. The conservation easement requires active management and periodic review. Failure to maintain the terms could result in forfeiture and property sale to cover the original easement payment. Dad's final note, written weeks before he died. Jesse, the easement review is this December. Derek doesn't know about any of this, doesn't know the North 40 isn't really ours free and clear, didn't want to burden him with complicated legal stuff. But Thornton's grandson bought his property last year. Same family, same grudge, same plan. You're the only one with the education to handle this. Need you to protect what Samuel built. I found Derek in the main house kitchen, reviewing feed invoices at the same scarred table where we'd eaten breakfast as children. He looked up, surprised to see me covered in dirt. Been playing in the mud, little brother? I dropped the journal and documents on the table between us. Did you know about the water rights dispute? About the conservation easement on the North 40? His confusion seemed genuine. What are you talking about? The North 40 is just wild land. Dad always said we'd clear it someday. We can't clear it. It's protected under a conservation easement that's up for review in 2 months. If we don't meet the management requirements, we lose the land and owe back the easement payment. With interest, that's roughly $200,000. Derek's face paled. That's impossible. Dad would have told me. He told me. Through these. I gestured at the letters and documents. The Thornton family has been trying to take this farm for over a century. They're still trying. And if we fail this review, they'll finally succeed. I explained everything. Samuel's battle, Dad's legal fight, the strategic conservation easement, the ongoing threat. Derek listened, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger to something like fear. Why didn't he just tell me this when he was alive? Because you think like a farmer. He needed someone who thinks like a lawyer, who understands legal strategy. That's why he left me the tractor, why he left those letters. This was never about choosing you over me. It was about giving us both what we needed to protect the farm together. Derek stood, pacing the kitchen. So, what do? We prepare for the review. We document that we're meeting the easement requirements. And we figure out what Thornton's grandson is planning before he makes his move. The county records office smelled like old paper and bureaucratic patience. Derek had stayed behind to manage the farm while I drove into town, the journal and documents locked safely in my car. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Margaret, recognized the Morrison name immediately. Your father was in here several times over the years, always researching property records. Nice man, very thorough. I need to see everything related to the conservation easement on our North 40 acres. And I need property records for the adjacent Thornton holdings. Margaret's eyebrows rose. The Thornton land? That's been a saga. Let me pull those files. She returned with 3 boxes of documents. The conservation easement terms were clear. We had to maintain the land in its natural state, prevent erosion, protect the creek headwaters, and submit to periodic environmental reviews. The next review was December 15th, 8 weeks away. But it was the Thornton property records that made my blood run cold. Young James Thornton IV had purchased his grandfather's land 2 years ago. In the past 18 months, he'd also bought 3 other properties surrounding our farm, creating a horseshoe of Thornton-owned land. Then I found the planning applications. Thornton had submitted preliminary proposals for a major development, luxury homes, a golf course, a resort complex. But the project's water supply calculations all assumed access to our creek. The most recent document was a letter from Thornton's attorney to the county, dated 3 months ago. Our client wishes to purchase the Morrison property, or alternatively, to challenge the conservation easement based on alleged non-compliance with management requirements. We request copies of all past review reports." Margaret leaned over my shoulder. "Your father saw that letter. He came in the day after it arrived, spent hours going through every document. He looked worried." I spread everything across Derek's kitchen table: maps, legal documents, photographs, Dad's notes. We worked past midnight, piecing together Dad's strategy and Thornton's threat. "The review focuses on 3 things," I explained: water quality, erosion control, and habitat preservation. Dad's been maintaining the land properly, but Thornton will challenge anything he can. We need documentation, professional assessments, everything buttoned up tight. Derek nodded, already making notes. "I can handle the physical work. There's a small washout on the eastern slope that needs addressing, and we should clear some invasive species near the creek. We also need a wildlife survey. The easement specifically protects migratory bird habitat. If we can document increased biodiversity, it strengthens our position." Over the following weeks, we worked together in a way we never had before. Derek managed the land improvements while I tackled the legal and documentation requirements. I'd taken a leave from my job, moving temporarily into Dad's old room in the farmhouse. I hired an environmental consultant who spent 3 days surveying the North 40. Her report was encouraging. The land was thriving, providing crucial habitat for several protected species. We had photographs, species counts, water quality tests, all professionally documented. But the real breakthrough came when I was digitizing some of Samuel's old photographs from the safe. One image, dated 1889, showed the creek at full flow. In the background, barely visible, was a small structure. I showed Derek. "What's that building?" He squinted at the faded image. "Looks like it might be on Thornton's property now. Want me to check it out?" We walked the property line the next morning. Sure enough, on Thornton's side, barely visible beneath decades of overgrowth, were the stone foundations of an old structure, and it was built directly across the creek. I spent the next week researching historical records of water usage, cross-referencing Samuel's journal with county archives. The picture that emerged was damning. The structure Derek found was the remains of an irrigation dam that Thornton's great-grandfather had built in 1889, illegally diverting creek water before it reached our property. That's what had triggered the legal battle, not competing claims to water rights, but outright theft. Samuel's journal entry from July 1889 included sketches of the dam and detailed measurements. He documented everything before taking legal action. The judge's ruling hadn't just confirmed our water rights, it had ordered the dam's removal and found Thornton guilty of deliberate water theft. This changed everything. The modern Thornton's claim to prior water usage was based on their great-grandfather's assertions, but those assertions had been proven false and fraudulent in court. That original ruling had never been challenged or overturned. I contacted the environmental consultant with my findings. She was excited. "This is significant. The current easement doesn't just protect your land, it protects a historic landmark related to 19th century water rights law. That dam foundation, even in ruins, has archaeological and legal significance." She helped me file documentation with the State Historical Society, noting the dam's location and its connection to settled water rights case law. Within days, we received notice that the site was under consideration for historical designation. Then I did something that felt reckless but necessary. I called James Thornton IV directly. "Mr. Thornton, this is Jesse Morrison. I think we should talk before the easement review. I've discovered some interesting historical information about our properties that might affect your development plans." His voice was smooth, confident. "I'm listening." "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the county records office. Bring your attorney. I'll bring mine." The conference room at the county records office felt too small with both legal teams present. Thornton was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in rural county government. His attorney was older, experienced, carrying a thick folder of documents. I'd hired Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney from the city who specialized in conservation easements. She'd reviewed all my research and seemed cautiously optimistic. Thornton opened aggressively. "Mr. Morrison, your family's easement is the only thing preventing a development that would bring jobs and tax revenue to this county. I'm prepared to make a generous offer for your property, more than generous." "I'm not here to sell," I said. "I'm here to prevent you from challenging our easement based on false historical claims." I slid copies of Samuel's journal entries across the table, along with the 1890 court ruling, photographs of the illegal dam, and the documentation I'd filed with the Historical Society. "Your great-great-grandfather didn't have prior water rights. He stole our water, built an illegal dam, lost in court, and faced criminal charges. The case established water rights precedent that's still cited in property law. That dam foundation on your property isn't evidence of prior usage. It's evidence of historical water theft." Thornton's attorney paged through the documents, his expression darkening. He leaned close to whisper to his client. Sarah spoke up. "Furthermore, the State Historical Society is reviewing the dam site for designation. Any development impacting that site would require extensive permitting and archaeological surveys. Your timeline just extended by several years, minimum." Thornton's jaw tightened. "This is ancient history. It has nothing to do with current property rights." "It has everything to do with your planned challenges to our easement," Sarah replied calmly. "Any claim based on prior water usage will be demolished by this documented history." The easement review was scheduled for a cold December morning. Derek and I met the review board at the North 40's entrance, our documentation organized in binders, the land itself speaking for itself. The board consisted of 3 county officials and an environmental scientist. They spent 4 hours walking the property, testing water quality, reviewing our management practices, examining our wildlife documentation. The lead reviewer, a woman named Dr. Patricia Holmes, seemed impressed. "The Morrison family has maintained this land exceptionally. The habitat improvements are significant, and your documentation is the most thorough I've seen. This is exactly what conservation easements are designed to achieve." As they prepared their final assessment, Derek nudged me, pointing toward the road. James Thornton IV was parked at a distance, watching. He'd come to witness what he'd expected to be our failure. Dr. Holmes delivered the verdict at the farmhouse with Derek, me, and the full review board present. "The Morrison Conservation Easement is renewed for another 10-year term. Additionally, based on the historical and environmental significance of this property, we're recommending additional protections and a possible expansion of the easement to include corridor lands connecting to the state forest." After they left, Derek and I stood on the porch, watching sunset paint the fields gold. The farm he'd inherited, the legacy I'd thought was only his, stretched before us. "I found something else in the tractor," I admitted. "A letter addressed to both of us." We opened it together. Dad's final words were simple. "A farm isn't just land. It's family working together, each bringing different strengths. Derek, you have my love for the soil. Jesse, you have my mind for solving problems. Together you have everything needed to protect what 5 generations built. I split the inheritance the only way that made sense, not by dividing the farm, but by giving each of you what you needed to save it together. Now you understand. Now you can move forward." Derek was quiet for a long moment. "Want to help me fix that tractor? Might be nice to get it running again." "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." And so we did. Over the following months, we restored Dad's Ferguson together, learning its mechanisms, understanding its importance. It would never plow fields again, too old and too valuable now. Instead, we parked it in front of the main barn, painted and gleaming, a reminder of what we'd almost lost and what we'd learned. The farm belonged to Derek, yes, but it belonged to me too, in a different way. Not in acres, but in purpose. Not in inheritance, but in understanding. Some legacies are measured in land. Others are measured in the wisdom to know when to leave and when to come home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Jesse and Derek's journey touched your heart the way it touched mine while writing it. There's something powerful about understanding that inheritance isn't always what we expect, and that sometimes the most valuable gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story from? What part resonated most with you? Have you ever discovered something unexpected about your own family's history? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means everything and helps me continue creating content that hopefully makes your day a little brighter. Until next time, remember, the most important legacies aren't the ones we inherit, but the ones we choose to protect. Thank you for being here.